Screening as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival in July is a film called Resisting Caste System. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, Vikrant Kishore. Vikrant, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thanks for welcoming me to your show. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you.
Good to talk to you. And you were just telling me before that you're located in China. A good international interview.
Yeah, I keep moving back and forth. Australia is home, but China is the workplace for the moment. Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, the film "Resisting Caste System," there's a lot of issues that come up in this film, and I had very little idea about how the caste system operates in India, let alone how it's affecting Indians in Australia. Tell me first of all about the caste system. How does it work, and how does it impact on various Indian people?
Yeah, caste system is a very old system. It's a system which actually comes from the religion Hinduism, and within Hinduism, initially it used to be divided in terms of a specific, in terms of what kind of work that you do. So there were the first at the hierarchy level, the number ones used to be knowledge giver. They were known as the Brahmins. The number two were the people who were the warriors or the ruling class. They were known as the Kshatriyas. Number three were the people who were working on business and other kind of work to serve the kings and the priestly class. So they were the Vaishyas or the trading classes. And number fourth were meant to be doing all the menial classes. They were Shudras. And then there was another class which was not classified in that particular division. And they were called the avarnas, people who are not classified, and they were treated as the lowliest. But then over the years or centuries, from a kind of a kind of a system which was all about the kind of work that you do, it became a hereditary thing that once you are in one caste, you can't get out of it. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one of the biggest statesmen from India, who worked really hard for eradicating caste system and fought for the rights for the people from the caste oppressed communities, he said caste is like a graded hierarchy, that everyone is in a specific grade and you cannot move in or out of that grade. And the worst impacted are the people who have been put for thousands of years for menial jobs. They cannot do anything else but menial jobs. Sweeping, cleaning, people who are debarred from fetching water from the wells, people who are debarred there, even shadows falling on someone from an upper caste would not be tolerated. People would be beaten up, people would be violated. Violence was a very common thing, and discrimination till date exists in India. And on a daily basis, like just 2 weeks back, there was a case where there was a Dalit man. Dalit are the people who are supposed to be the oppressed community people, and we refer them as Dalit or people who have been left behind, but it was also an assertive term. So this person, Dalit man, he fell in love with someone from a high caste, and then the parents and the brother of the girl, they invited him to have a chat. And instead of having a chat, they tortured him to so much that extent that he died. They killed him actually. And this is a normal story, that honor killing becomes a very kind of a thing. That honor is that when a lower caste person tries to marry into your community, you have to teach them a lesson, and we hear that. I'll give you another example. Just again, couple of days back, the whole aspect of caste pride, that when someone is getting married, so this groom from Dalit community, he decided to sit on a horse to go for his marriage. But then sitting on a horse to go for marriage is supposedly a kind of a high caste privilege. Low caste cannot dare to do. And because they did that, people started pelting stone on them, and they made sure that the groom gets out of the horse and they cannot go. Even they had police protection, and the police couldn't do anything. So there are stories like that. But in India, the violence is there, it is outright. And that that everyone knows and everybody also talks about it. But my concern was when more than 20 years back when I came to Australia and I saw these practices which was not known by the mainstream Australians or the broader community of Australia who can understand racism. The biggest difference between racism and caste is that in race, it is in front of your eyes. You can you can distinct between the color, between brown and black and white and black and different colors. With caste is for anyone, it's a bit difficult to know, and that's what I wanted to talk about it in the film. And I wanted to present the film for the broader Australian community.
How interesting to hear that background and that situation. And just as a political aside, I wonder if the Indian government can do something about ending that caste system.
Well, Indian government has been doing and it has done for, and one of the best things was as I just gave the name of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he was the chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee. So he coming from the Dalit background and having that powerful position of chairman of the draft of the Constitution, he actually provided safeguards to fight against any form of discrimination. He outlawed discrimination. It is part of Indian Constitution already. So you cannot discriminate. He also provided affirmative actions to get people who were not put into jobs, who were not given education. So affirmative action was put into education, affirmative action was put into government jobs, and that has really brought lots of people from these communities to a particular playing field to some extent, but majority are still in the fringes as yet. So the Indian government, if I say yes, they did quite a lot, and thanks to Ambedkar, thanks to Nehru, thanks to people like Gandhi, who all thought about that it was a social evil. They termed it as a social evil which needs to be get rid of. But then mindset has rid of it. Till date we see violence. Till date we see generational trauma. One of the biggest impact is that how do you erase a 3,000-year history of generational trauma is that when people want to judge you on the basis of your caste. So when I came to Australia, people were often asking me, so Vikrant Kishore, and Kishore generally in India, the last name refers to your caste. So if my last name doesn't refer to a caste, it's a very secular last name. It just says someone who's youthful. Kishore means someone who's youthful, and people would say, so Vikrant Kishore what? It's like, what do you want to know? And it's like, do you mean you want me to tell you my caste? Because people want to judge you that if you are of their level or below their level or above their level, so the friendships can be formed on the basis of that, or more relationship in terms of food culture. So who do you share your food with? If it is your caste people or caste that you can assimilate or you can go along with, all those things are very, very much decided till date. And I've found that in Australia, and that's why I took this road journey to talk to people, not in just one city and be happy about it that I've got five people who are saying the same thing. But then I wanted to see the pattern, and especially why Australia becomes important. Because here, the skilled migration, the people who come to Australia are all very well educated. They are at, especially Indian community, they are very well placed. They are doctors, they are engineers, they are doing big businesses. They are very, most of them have master's degree and all. And if the same people show the same kind of direct or indirect prejudice, then it is something for us to question that.
How incredible to hear all that and to hear Indian communities in other countries, and your documentary looks at Australia, impacted by this caste system. It's the stories that are in your film and explanations and so on are quite incredible.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to do. Is that it was difficult. One of the thing is, Peter, when we do stories on caste, you will see in terms of documentary and stories on diaspora. This is the first ever documentary on caste system in the diasporic communities. And why? Because of generational trauma. I'll give you my example. for me coming out and telling people that, hey, I come from a caste oppressed community. And, and then people start judging you that, hey, he's from that community. Oh, he must be. Like lots of times, the other day I was talking to someone and he said that, hey, Vikrant, you and me, we both can work in this area because we understand and we can bring the voice of the caste oppressed communities. And I said, hey, but let me clarify. I also belong to that same community, and that's why I'm, really wanting to do that. So I don't need validation. I don't need a person's voice because they think they are powerful, but because we also own that particular area, and we want to be our own voice rather than just finding people to voice us. And that was the kind of attempt being made. And good thing was that, Peter, I don't know if in the film I also mentioned that, the caste thing in Australia when in 2020, the Australian Human Rights Commission asked for a public submission in 2020 to broaden its anti-racism policy. And that was the time we realized that this is the best time for us to put in a policy paper asking Australian government and Australian AHRC to look at caste to be included within the anti-racism policy. And then there were multiple submissions, and ours was also among one of the submissions. And then we started having conversations. And actually, the idea of documentary, in fact, came from the AHRC discussions when I was having a meeting, and they said, we keep hearing about caste, but we don't see the stories coming out. And they said, and I said, listen, I've been planning to work and I've been wanting to do a web series and capturing small stories of people and the issues on caste. And then I said, hey, listen, I need to make this documentary. And that prompted me. And good thing was in 2024, the AHRC included caste within Australia's anti-racism policy. Good thing was now the Melbourne Council has included caste within its anti-discriminatory policy. Monash Council has included caste within its anti-discrimination policy. Queensland's work rights policies now also includes caste discrimination because people like us in different parts of Australia are now pushing and asking that as South Asians are becoming more than 1 million people in Australia, it is time to look at these kind of issues which might hurt the social cohesion, which might be questioned, and which is a fair aspect of equality and dignity aspect that we must look at. And lots of times people always say that, hey, we don't understand this community. Hey, we don't understand how caste operates. Hey, does this take place in Australia? And I thought, hey, let me do some explanation. Let's talk to some people.
Well, you certainly have. Tell me, how easy was it to make the documentary, getting production support behind you and all that sort of thing, and to find people who are willing to talk to camera about this?
It was a very difficult thing, Peter. Making stories on caste is never an easy thing. Finding people, so I approached a few Dalit communities, or Ambedkar International Mission and Navyana Charitable Trust, because they have a sizable membership. And I asked people that would people be interested in telling their stories. So initially, as I said, I started as a web series, so I wanted to focus on small stories and go around that. And I needed some kind of crew and a bit of funding. So at that time, I was working with Deakin University back in Melbourne. So I put in a proposal for the Deakin Motion Lab, and I said I want to create this particular web series, and they approved around $5,000 as a pilot episode. So just for one episode, they gave me 5,000 to hire a crew and get the thing, and it was just bang in the middle of COVID. So I got a small window to interview one of the person who came through one of the organizations, and she was able to talk. And I interviewed her, and then another interview I did in Sydney. And then situation as happened during COVID, we had so much of changes in the university and my job. I had to take a decision, where do I go next. And then I ended up being in China because the University of Nottingham, the UK based, they offered me a position. And then in 2022 I moved to China, and then suddenly I forgot about this particular project which I was wanting to do. And then being in China, I thought probably it's not going to happen again. But then I managed to put in a proposal to my university, the Nottingham University, and I said, hey, listen, I'm interested in doing this. And I was already working. So I got good support from my head of school and from the university. And then the next thing I knew that I had around 7 days time to travel to back to Melbourne, Australia, and I said, let me do something different. How can I make this story? And I make the best use of my 7 8 days in Australia. And then I planned this whole road trip and got all these people to talk to me. And I said, I can't do anything, and I didn't have enough budget because all the money was coming from my pocket. So, except for the pilot episode, which was all done and dusted, rest I was the single person crew. I did everything, and I drove myself all right from Melbourne till Coffs Harbour, 5 days, and then back to Melbourne. But having some interesting talks, meeting some really interesting people, and sharing their views. But as Peter, you said, what was difficult? Most difficult was when we are talking about caste. Lots of times people are very cautious about what they share and what they don't share, and that is where I was not supposed to feature in the documentary. It was never about my story. And then I realized that what I'm missing is a kind of a thread to attach all these stories together rather than just having people coming and talk. Someone needs to put it in the context. And then I used my road trip, my experiences, and what I felt. And when I was, because I have a very, I love music. And when I'm on road, either I'm listening to music or I'm thinking about something. So, you'll see this musical interludes, which is poetic kind of my own kind of way to say what I think about these situations. And then I wanted to convert it into a kind of a musical interludes in between, so that to do an experiment with the documentary as well, rather than, because I have been making very simple, easy style of documentary, not pushing myself to do some experiments. And this was a very hard documentary, and I was wanting, where do I bring that breather in? Where do I make people feel a bit comfortable and understanding in a much more poetic manner? And that's where I inserted myself, when it becomes my story as a kind of a person who's weaving the story of others. And I've thought it felt for me, and I just had a screening in China, my first screening in my university. And you won't believe, Peter, after screening to a 90% Chinese students, masters and PhD students, and all the staff members are mostly international. So the first reaction I got, one of the girls, she stood up after the screening and she said, Jai Bhim. Jai Bhim is the cry that people, it's a kind of a way we greet each other when we meet. Jai Bhim is a kind of a nod to Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, saying that whatever you have done for our freedom, for our privilege, for our education, we acknowledge you. And that is the acknowledgement that we use. And the girl actually stood up and said Jai Bhim. And I was totally moved. I said, you understood the whole film, and just by using those two words, you gave me what I actually wanted people to take away. And she said, yes, I could understand the feeling. In China, nobody understands caste. They have never, that discussion is not there. But they could understand the whole emotion behind it. I had another colleague of mine who's from UK, in London, and he sent me an email, Vikrant. I was very moved, and I started talking and making people understand what I saw and what caste is, because he said that in London, in UK, there is a huge Indian population, and we have never talked about this ever, and you made me aware of something very new. And I thought, at least it's making a bit of difference.
Okay, wow, what a story, and what a situation. And yes, your film will have an impact. I can see how that will happen. So that interests me. Apart from the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, where the film will be screening in July, and you mentioned a screening in China, will the film be, or has the film been screened elsewhere, including India?
No, in India, I want to have a screening, but probably early next year. The next screening, I'm taking it to, I'm one of the instructors this year at the Locarno International Film Festival's Real Academy. So, the Locarno International Film Festival runs Real Academy for budding filmmakers. So, they have allowed me to use my film to use it as a reflexive documentary, and teach students about, they're not students because they have people of different not background, from early filmmakers, early career filmmakers, and film students. So I'll be teaching them. So, and Locarno is a very prestigious venue. So I'm really looking forward to show my film and talk about the film there. The film has recently been accepted in another film festival, the Mannheim International Arts and Film Festival. This is in Germany. So I'm looking forward to having a screening. I'm also in talks with on the sidelines with the Heidelberg University, again in Heidelberg in Germany, to have a kind of a screening at the university. So I have a whole lot of festivals coming up and screenings there. But India, of course, it's my home, from where I come from, and it will be something. I really look forward to have that screening. But we are still in the planning stage because it's going to happen sometimes in January. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. It was good the film is going to get out there and be seen. That's important. Just as a small aside, I see a number of Indian films, and I have colleagues who tell me about Indian films that they see here in Melbourne. And they tell me that very few of them deal with the issue of the caste system as a major topic in the narrative. Is that, do you think, deliberate choices by filmmakers to avoid discussing it?
Yes, yes, that's a huge problem, especially with Bollywood Hindi cinema. They have always whitewashed caste. Caste was something that they always fear treading to, and there has been a very handful of films ever made. You know, if you look at the whole Indian cinema history, you can just count how many cinemas have been made on the issue of caste. And even if those films were made, most of these films were made as the parallel cinema movement of India, which was considered non-commercial or not having enough commercial values, which were supported or funded by government or of different organizations. So they were never looked with the mainstream idea. But good thing is that Peter, there is another uh, India doesn't have just one single film industry. India is a place of multiple film industries. So we have Hindi cinema, the Bollywood, which we call the Bollywood cinema. Then we have from South India, we have Malayalam cinema, we have Tamil cinema, we have Kannada cinema. And Tamil and Malayalam cinema have been making some incredibly interesting films dealing with caste and caste issues. There's a filmmaker called Par Ranjit, and he has got a group of filmmakers who are making really high-end commercial cinema, which is changing the discussion, and that is also impacting Bollywood cinema. In fact, just recently, two of the films from the south were remade, which were on based on caste. Of course, they dilute the caste aspect in Bollywood. They don't have the courage to use it the way it is. And I wrote an article for Senses of Cinema a couple of years back, how they whitewash caste and how they represent only the upper caste stories in the particular in these films. So which is a very problematic thing. And now suddenly people are asking, but then they are, and another thing we have to know that the current government also impacts how these stories are told. And their interest is not on caste because it doesn't go well with them. So it has anything to do with, Pakistan bashing or anything to do with action. Those are the kind of Bollywood Hindi movies that you will see, which is being lapped up by people everywhere. People are really enjoying, a bit of propaganda here and there. But the moment you think about or you talk about something serious, firstly the censor board will censor it so much because in India we have a censor board. So if you go for classification, there is a group of people who will decide what. So the last two films on caste that I know went through so much of censoring. They moved out so many issues of caste. They moved out, things where they were saying, hey, you are discriminating against us, don't, even things like that was removed. Homebound, which was one of the shortlisted Oscar films, Homebound, by Neeraj Ghaiwan. It was the India's official entry to Oscars. Even that was diluted and toned down by the censor board. It had to go through cuts. Yet it made a huge impact, and the best thing, I really enjoyed the film. Neeraj made a fantastic film and an international Oscar entry from India's side, and which was shortlisted as among the top 15 for foreign film as well. and it got the viewership, and it is on Netflix now, and lots of people are watching it. And that people, filmmakers like Neeraj Ghaiwan in Bollywood, of course, he's doing his work, and he's not compromising. Of course, they are made to compromise somewhere by snipping out some of those kind of discussions or dialogues. But then that was a fantastic film. If you get a chance, do watch Homebound on Netflix. It is a very interesting story about the marginalization, not of Dalits, but also Muslims in India. And it's the story of a Dalit and Muslims, and the victimization and marginalization of both in the contemporary India. I was moved. And the day I watched it, I ended up writing a full essay on the article, and I sent it to the filmmaker Neeraj. I said, "Hey, I couldn't stop. I had to write about it because it moved me to that extent. Because this is the story I wanted to get Bollywood to make, and you did it, and I congratulated him." And then he shared it on his own, all of his social media, and I was really happy that at least what I'm writing is also being, they are appreciating that. Yes, because not very many people want to write about caste issues. Even critics, they would not touch it.
Hmm. So interesting to hear all of that, and I'll follow up that film that you mentioned, and so on. Look, Vikrant, great to talk to you. Just quick final question: Are you working on perhaps a follow-up film or any other film projects?
Yes, at the moment, I'm thinking of a follow-up project which would include both the diasporic community and the Indian community. And uh, at the moment, I'm thinking about what's in your surname, something like that, as to how surnames impact caste and how important is that. So,
Hmm.
looking at different surnames and why it becomes a kind of a important part of discrimination, how discrimination starts being perpetuated by knowing your surname. So that's my next idea. That is what I've started talking to a few people and seeing what's the interest, and hopefully we'll start the shoot early next year when I'm in India. Yeah.
Very interesting. Look forward to seeing that follow-up film, and I'm sure Melbourne audiences will really appreciate seeing Resisting Caste System at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival in July. And we've been speaking to the director, Vikrant Kishore. Vikrant, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much, Peter, and I would definitely invite you to come and watch the film. Are you based in Melbourne or in
Yes,
Sydney?
Melbourne.
Are you based in Melbourne? Yeah, yeah. So it would be a pleasure to see you in person, and I really thank you for this opportunity today to speak to you.
My pleasure. I wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
bye bye.